Andrea Štěpánková from Bučovice, Czech Republic. Andrea is a historian and a researcher at Masaryk University in Brno. And she's specializing in Anabaptist communities and early modern Moravia, So with a particular focus on Hutterites and events. So this is your stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for introducing me. I'm about to introduce my PhD thesis research, which has just recently been finally published as a book. So if you understand Czech or are willing to run it through Google Translator, you're very welcome to read it. Moravian Anabaptism represents a key chapter in both Moravian and Anabaptist history. Unlike in other regions of the time, they found refuge in Moravia, forming lasting communities and ties with local society. The Moravian nobility played a crucial role in mediating their integration, and this mutual, if limited openness, is seen by my research as a decisive factor in the history of Moravian Anabaptism. Okay.
Wait a moment, just go on.
The Hutterites' isolation, shaped both by their own beliefs and by external rejection, placed them on the margins of society. As foreign refugees with a distinct faith and lifestyle, they were seen, of course, as heretical outsiders. Yet, as historians like Bronislav Geremek and Jean-Claude Schmitt argue, even marginalized groups could be integrated if they were economically useful. My research builds on this idea. Although the Hutterites were culturally separate, their active role in socio-economic life made integration into Moravian society possible. These social and economic interactions are the central focus of my study. Throughout the Hutterite century in Moravia, various actors influenced their integration, with the nobility playing the leading role. Others included the king, Catholic and non-Catholic groups, estate officials, craftsmen, and local subjects. Analyzing specific interactions helps clarify the Hutterites' place in society and offers broader insights into how marginalized groups could integrate into major society. My research, grounded in a historical anthropological approach, assumes that integration was shaped by both sides. Thanks to the unusually rich Hutterite and local sources, it is possible to explore these mutual relations, actors and their motivations from a two-side perspective. These contexts were studied in three basic categories that I consider defining for the relationship between the Hutterites and Moravia. First, fear. Second, elementary understanding. And third, acceptance and integration. The first category explores early modern society's instinctive fear of the Hutterites as religious and social radicals, as well as the fear they themselves felt as persecuted outsiders. The second shows how this fear gradually diminished on both sides. The third examines their partial integration into Moravian society. Early contact between the Hutterites and Moravian society was marked by mutual fear and distrust. Locals saw the Hutterites as religious radicals, social outsiders, and later also as economic competitors. Their foreign origin, unique lifestyle, and isolation in house Habans deepened this mistrust. For their part, the Hutterites feared the godless outside world and withdrew into their isolated communities. This only reinforced suspicion. Initial responses included imprisonment, torture, and executions, but Moravia's relative religious tolerance soon limited such harsh measures. The Hutterites endured two major waves of persecution in the 30s and the 40s of the 16th century, during which many left their homes or Moravia altogether. Nevertheless, due to the support of the Moravian nobility and the ineffectiveness of this kind of persecution, which resulted in Hutterites simply wandering the countryside or shuttling between Moravia, Austria, and Upper Hungary, the movement could not be suppressed. Fear of the Hutterites persisted even as basic understanding developed. The king viewed their presence as a threat to royal authority and a political embarrassment, perceiving the Anabaptist presence in the Moravian Margraviate as a sign of excessive sovereignty of the Moravian nobility and a political failure of his own, which made him slander among the imperial estates. Fear of the Hutterites was also continuously stoked by the Catholic Church, particularly by two priests active during the recatholicization of the Mikulov and Valtice estates at the end of the 16th century, whose works became a key source of anti-Hutterite rhetoric. Some fear bordering on hostility and envy also persisted among local craftsmen, for whom Hutterite economic activity represented unwanted competition. In contrast, Moravian nobles feared them the least and played a crucial role in supporting and integrating them into local society. An intermediate stage between fear and acceptance was so-called elementary understanding, which took place in four basic areas: economic, confessional, political, and social. In these areas, fear was either partially dissolved, or at least the motivation to suppress it was evident. Understanding reaching more, or ideally all, of these dimensions significantly facilitated and accelerated the integration process. The key to this understanding was the Hutterites' economic value. Nobles saw their usefulness in the estate economy, and even the king, facing an empty royal treasury, considered tolerating them in exchange for taxes. The Hutterites, in turn, understood that cooperation with nobles brought them income, protection, and long-term survival. The Anabaptists, including the Hutterites, also sought confessional understanding. They wrote texts for Moravian nobles and tried to engage with other religious groups, especially the Unity of the Brethren. Even though these efforts did not lead to lasting success and the Hutterite faith never gained real noble support, their peaceful approach to religion fit well with Moravia's tolerant atmosphere. This mutual tolerance meant that Hutterites weren't persecuted for their beliefs, and they willingly worked for landlords of any faith, even for the ones who were prominent representatives of the Catholic Church. For the Moravian nobility, the Hutterites also had political value. Nobles used their presence to assert estate autonomy against the king's centralizing efforts. Debates about the Hutterites often surfaced in provincial diets, where the king could only enforce his will through long-term, exhausting pressure. But even then, royal decisions were hard to enforce and lacked real impact. The king's main representative in Moravia, the provincial governor, faced a conflict between his loyalty to the crown and his estate identity. And despite being the top official, he could only warn or report nobles who refused to follow royal orders, as their local authority often limited his power. The Hutterites worked hard to be socially understood. They saw the nobility not just economic partners, but as part of the social order needed in a non-Hutterite world. They were willing to pay dues and fulfill obligations as long as it did not conflict with their beliefs. Noble landlords, in turn, recognized the Hutterites as valuable and loyal subjects, not just economically useful. The Hutterites actively defended themselves against accusations of being radical or immoral, stressing their peaceful and harmless nature, because they really cared about being accepted by Moravian society. The peak of this process was the Hutterites' integration into Moravian society. This took the form of either cooperation or conflict. The key form of cooperation was in economic and property relations. As the Hutterites settled in Moravia and acquired land and houses, they had to adapt to local property legal norms. Even though they held property communally and did not swear loyalty to feudal lords. To manage this, their communities were always legally represented by individuals, by the elders. Through arrangements like these, they smoothly adapted to the existing system and fulfilled feudal obligations. Another clear sign of integration was their work for nobility and cities as skilled craftsmen. Their goods and services were in demand across society. Hutterite craftsmen penetrated nearly all imaginable social strata of the 16th and 17th century Moravia. Formal contracts were used to avoid misunderstandings and ensure clear terms. These economic ties brought outsiders into contact with the Hutterites, noblemen's officials tasked with communication with the Hutterites, or messengers delivering correspondence from the nobility began to enter these communities. People from surrounding villages and towns came to the Hutterites to buy or sell goods. Hutterite bathhouses were a popular destination for both noble and common visitors. The house Haban also became a welcome stop for nobles and their companions when traveling through Moravia. Strong relationships sometimes grew from these interactions. Initially practical turned into personal. The Hutterites, in turn, showed loyalty to the land and its nobility. They expressed this through their voluntary decision to contribute taxes to the prosperity of the land, and through their participation in the estates uprising in the 1620s, and through the aid that they provided to the rebellious estates, either out of loyalty to their lords or to the land itself. One must also not underestimate the sympathy shown for the Hutterite faith, both from nobles who out of curiosity attended Hutterite celebrations of the Lord's Supper, and from the surrounding population, some of whom, though probably only in rare cases, chose to accept the Hutterite faith. Conflicts between the Hutterites and Moravian society often arose from people joining and later leaving the community, unable to adapt to its lifestyle. Those who left forfeited their property, which led to legal disputes, some even reaching the emperor or provincial courts. These cases highlighted the unclear legal status of the Hutterites, especially in criminal law. Attempts to clarify their position, like that of Karel the Elder of Žorytín in 1612, failed, and each case had to be handled individually. Common complaints included property disputes, accusations of theft or negligence in medical care. On the other hand, Hutterites were also victims of crime such as theft, fraud, assault, or arson. Another major source of conflict was between the Hutterites and their noble landlords, due to disagreements over contracts, unpaid wages, excessive taxes, or forced labor. Some disputes escalated. Hutterites threatened to leave, while nobles used imprisonment or confiscated property. Still, many of these conflicts ended in compromise, as both sides saw the benefits of cooperation. Integration was mutual. As Moravian society accepted the Hutterites, The Hutterites also absorbed elements of local culture. This led to tensions within their own community. The strict discipline of the House Haban clashed with growing desires for private property, luxuries, and worldly entertainment. They also struggled with alcohol abuse and, in rare cases, the spread of folk magic or alchemy. As the founding generation aged and died, some original ideals faded and enthusiasm declined. The end of the Hutterite presence in Moravia was marked by a return of fear. The king accused them of rebellion and supporting the estate's uprising, reviving old accusations of heresy and social revolutionarism. Fears that the Hutterites might fund the enemy justified a hunt for their hidden money, the so-called hunt for the Hutterite treasures. After the uprising, the nobility could no longer protect them, and the Hutterites were expelled from Moravia. A century-long journey of integration ended where it began, with fear and rejection. In conclusion, I would like to briefly present our project, mapping the dynamics of Anabaptist communities in Moravia in the 16th and 17th centuries. Or more specifically, one of its main outcomes. We are currently developing an online database which is based on an enormous amount of data gathered mostly from the Hutterite chronicles. The database will allow users to search for information by location, but also by other categories. We are mapping, for instance, the presence of specific crafts, the so-called functions like diener, vorsteher, etc., migration patterns, the variety of Anabaptist groups, so we are focusing only on the Hutterites, and interactions between Anabaptists and various members of Moravian society. So in short, the database will contain all available data related to Hutterite settlements in Moravia. For users, it will serve as an extensive collection of raw data that they can further process and analyze. The database is designed to serve both scholars and the general public. This database will be linked to an interactive map that will visualize not only the dynamics of Anabaptist settlements, but also the network of contacts and activities of Anabaptists across Moravia. We are cooperating with a team of anthropologists who deliver data from the field, excavating and analyzing Anabaptist or Hutterite skeletal remains, as you'll hear about in a moment. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward for a question.